Welcome to The Explainer. We are jumping right into a wildly fascinating connection today. We're looking at the psychological ability to delay rewards and how that ties directly into the compounding math of tiny daily behaviors. So, if you've ever sat there wondering why it's just so incredibly hard to stick to a good habit, or why some people seem to effortlessly snowball into massive success, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to break down exactly how your daily choices add up.
Okay, let's put you in a slightly sticky situation. Picture yourself as a 4-year-old in the famous 1960s Stanford marshmallow experiment. Psychologist Walter Mischel sits you in a room, and a researcher drops a single, fluffy, delicious-looking marshmallow right in front of you. And they offer you a deal. You can eat it right now, or if you can just sit there and wait about 15 minutes, you'll get a second one. The setup is brilliantly simple. Small reward right now, or a bigger one later. How do you handle that itch for instant gratification?
Section 1. The Power of Waiting. Let's look at what actually happened to the kids who managed to resist that single marshmallow. It's wild how well this illustrates the long-term impact of impulse control. When researchers followed up decades later, the results were staggering. The kids who held out, the high delayers, had massive advantages literally across the board. As teens, they rocked significantly higher SAT scores. As adults, they had a lower body mass index. Get this, every single minute a preschooler delayed translated to a 0.2-point lower BMI 30 years later. Plus, they had a much better ability to cope with stress, were less likely to go through a divorce, and had a notably decreased risk of substance abuse. Resisting early temptations clearly translates to persistent, measurable benefits for your entire life.
Section 2. Hot and cool processing.
So, why is waiting so painfully difficult? Well, there's a literal battle happening inside your brain's cognitive, affective personality system. When temptation strikes, you process it in one of two ways. First, there's hot processing. This is highly emotional, totally impulsive. It lights up the ventral striatum, your reward center, making you hyperfixate on the sweet, gooey, sugary reality of that marshmallow. Then you have cool processing. This is your logical, controlled side. It taps into the prefrontal cortex to calm you down. The kids who successfully waited literally distracted themselves by imagining the marshmallow wasn't food at all, just a harmless, fluffy cotton ball. Ultimately, mastering self-control means knowing how to flip your brain's switch from hot to cool.
Section 3. The 1% rule. Let's pivot from the psychology of temptation to the actual math of success. Enter James Clear's concept of atomic habits. Habits are basically the compound interest of self-improvement. If you can manage to get just 1% better every single day for a year, the math says you don't just become 365% better. No way. Thanks to compounding, you end up almost 38 times better by the end of the year. On the flip side, a 1% daily decline drags you almost all the way down to zero. Small choices don't just add up, they multiply.
Want a perfect real-world example? Look at the British cycling team in 2003. These guys had endured a century of profound mediocrity. Literally, just one Olympic gold medal since 1908. But then, their new performance director, Dave Brailsford, rolled in with a philosophy called the aggregation of marginal gains. They weren't looking for some earth-shattering innovation. They hunted down tiny, 1% improvements in totally overlooked areas. We're talking redesigning bike seats for comfort, rubbing alcohol on the tires for better grip, wearing electrically heated overshorts to keep muscles primed. They even hired a surgeon to teach the optimal hand-washing technique to prevent colds, and painted the inside of their trucks white just to spot any performance-degrading dust.
So, what exactly happens when you stack all those tiny delayed gratifications together? Absolute domination. Just 5 years after implementing these atomic changes, the British cycling team completely took over the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, taking home an astounding 60% of the available gold medals in road and track cycling. By 2012, they were smashing world records, and they went on to win 5 Tour de France victories in just 6 years. That is the sheer, undeniable power of the 1% rule.
But look, compounding is a double-edged sword. It can work for you, but it can absolutely work against you too. On the positive side, learning one new idea today compounds your knowledge over a lifetime. Automating a tiny task today frees up your brain and compounds your productivity tomorrow. Even just being nice strengthens your relationships over time. But check out the negative side. Daily frustrations and minor stresses, those compound into serious health issues. A habit of negative thinking creates a mental trap that just multiplies. Microaggressions and daily outrage slowly build up until they spread like wildfire. Your daily choices are always compounding. The only question is, in which direction?
To really visualize this, imagine you're a pilot flying out of Los Angeles, heading for New York City. If you adjust the nose of the plane by just 3.5 degrees south, right at takeoff, which is a shift of barely a few feet, you won't even notice it at first. But magnify that across the entire distance of the United States, and that tiny 1% error fundamentally alters your destination. You're going to end up landing in Washington, D.C. instead of New York. Your habits act the exact same way. Long-term success is the product of daily habits, not once-in-a-lifetime transformations.
Section 4. The plateau of latent potential.
If the math behind small habits is so universally powerful, why do we constantly fail to maintain them? Why do we always revert to craving instant results? The answer is perfectly captured by the melting ice cube metaphor. Picture an ice cube sitting on a table in a cold 25-degree room. Slowly, the room heats up. 26 degrees, 27, 28. You're putting in the heat, the energy, the effort, but the ice cube just sits there. 30, 31, still nothing. And then you hit 32 degrees and the ice finally begins to melt. Complaining about not seeing success after working hard for a month is basically like complaining that the ice didn't melt at 29 degrees. Your hard work wasn't wasted in those early stages. It was just being stored up until you hit that breakthrough temperature.
See, we're hardwired to expect progress to be perfectly linear. We want 1 unit of hard work to immediately equal 1 unit of visible reward. But the reality of compounding is that the most powerful outcomes are always delayed. This creates what James Clear calls the valley of disappointment. It's that frustrating gap between what you think should happen and what actually happens in the early days of building a habit. Because we don't get the instant gratification of a visible result, we get discouraged, we quit. And usually we quit right before we cross that plateau and experience that massive upward curve.
Section 5. Systems instead of goals.
So what's the ultimate solution to bypassing this valley of disappointment and actually delaying gratification? We have to completely rethink how we approach our ambitions. For decades, the prevailing wisdom has been to set specific, actionable goals. But we need to draw a hard line between goals, the results you want to achieve, and systems, which are the daily processes that actually gets you there. Think about it. If you're a coach, the goal is to win the championship. But your system? That's how you recruit players, manage practice, and run drills every single day. If you really want better results, you kind of need to forget about setting goals and focus entirely on your systems instead.
Why? Well, focusing strictly on goals is actually pretty flawed. First off, it suffers from major survivorship bias. Every Olympian wants to win gold, so the goal itself isn't what separates the winners from the losers, the system does. Second, achieving a goal, like finally cleaning your room, is only a temporary, momentary fix if you keep your sloppy habits. Third, a goal-first mentality completely restricts your happiness. It constantly tricks your brain into thinking, I'll finally be happy once I achieve this one thing. And finally, it creates this nasty yo-yo effect. Once a runner finishes a marathon, they often stop training entirely because the goal is just gone. Systems, on the other hand, keep you playing the game indefinitely.
There's a brilliant quote from James Clear that really hammers home our core takeaway for this explainer. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Your long-term success isn't defined by the height of your ambitions or even how badly you want that second marshmallow. It is entirely defined by the strength, consistency, and structure of your daily habits.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, take a hard look at your current trajectory. You now know that every single small action is a step toward either positive or negative compounding. So ask yourself, is your daily system built for the one marshmallow you want right now, or is it building toward the massive, compounding rewards waiting for you just over the horizon? Keep focusing on those 1% improvements because the math and the choice is entirely yours.